I don't believe in ghost stories, never have. Urban legends were just tales spun by bored minds. But as I walked down the dimly lit streets of Belgrade that fateful night, something felt off. The city was eerily quiet, as if the very air had conspired to suppress any sound. I remember laughing at the idea of the so-called Serbian Dancing Lady, a viral legend that had gripped social media over the past few weeks. People claim to have seen her dancing alone on the streets, spinning beneath flickering streetlights, a knife in her hand. They said if you got too close, she'd run after you, hunting her prey like some twisted predator. Of course, I scoffed at the absurdity of it all. I'm Luca, a journalist. My job was to debunk myths, to separate fact from fiction. And this dancing woman? Just another hoax, a joke that people fed into their paranoia. That night, I decided to chase the story. It was nearly midnight when I left my apartment, camera in hand, determined to catch whatever this hoax was on film. The streets were deathly still, the kind of stillness that crawls under your skin and settles in your bones. Not even the usual clatter of traffic or the hum of distant voices could be heard. Just silence. 2 stray dogs scurried across my path, startled by my presence. Their sudden movement jolted me, but I pressed on, heading towards the alley where the dancing lady was last seen. The cold air wrapped around me like an icy grip, and with each step, I could feel my nerves fraying. Belgrade had never felt like this. It was as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting. For what? I wasn't sure. Finally, I arrived at the alley. The streetlight above flickered, casting long, trembling shadows on the cobblestone path. I pulled out my camera, its familiar weight providing a small sense of comfort. Let's see if this ghost lady is real, I muttered to myself, though my voice trembled ever so slightly. As I began filming, narrating the empty streets, something changed. The air grew thick, almost suffocating, and then I heard it. Soft at first, barely audible, a faint melody carried by the wind. It was haunting, as if coming from nowhere yet everywhere at once. My breath hitched in my throat. I turned my head slowly, and that's when I saw her. She stood at the far end of the street, bathed in the weak, flickering light of the street lamp. Her gown flowed like liquid shadows, her body swaying in a hypnotic dance. The music seemed to sync with her movements, a slow, eerie rhythm that sent chills racing down my spine. My heart pounded in my chest. This couldn't be real. She was too far away to make out any details, but the way she moved, slow, deliberate, as if performing for an invisible audience, was unnerving. There was something wrong about it, something unnatural. My hands shook as I zoomed in with my camera, the lens struggling to focus in the dim light. But it was enough to capture her, to prove that she was real. She twirled once more, her gown sweeping the ground like a whisper of death. Then she stopped, and she looked at me. My blood turned to ice. Even from a distance, I could feel her eyes on me, piercing through the shadows. Her face was obscured, hidden behind the veil of her dark hair, but the weight of her gaze was undeniable. I wanted to move, to run, but my feet felt cemented to the ground. She took a step forward, then another. Her dance was over, replaced by a slow, deliberate walk, each step bringing her closer to me. I forced myself to look down, and that's when I saw it, a glint of metal in her hand, a knife. Panic exploded in my chest, and suddenly every instinct screamed at me to run. I turned and bolted, my feet slamming against the pavement, heart thundering in my ears. The narrow streets twisted and turned like a labyrinth, each corner offering a fleeting hope of escape. But no matter how fast I ran, I could hear her behind me, those soft, steady footsteps, never speeding up, never slowing down. She was toying with me. I glanced over my shoulder. She was still there, her silhouette growing closer, the knife catching the faint light with each step. My breath came in ragged gasps as I stumbled down an alley, crouching behind a dumpster to catch my breath. My hands shook as I clutched my camera, still recording. I had to get proof that this wasn't just a twisted prank. But then silence. The footsteps had stopped. I dared to peek over the edge of the dumpster. She was gone, or so I thought. For a moment, I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe she had given up. and vanish back into whatever shadowy realm she had come from. But as I began to rise, something shifted in the air. I froze. She was there, just a few feet away, her face hidden in the shadows once more. Staring, watching. A low, suffocating dread settled over me as we locked eyes. Or at least, I imagined we did. Her face was still obscured, but I could feel her gaze boring into me. Time stretched, every second an eternity, as we remained locked in this unnatural standoff. And then, without warning, she turned and disappeared into the darkness, vanishing like smoke in the wind. I waited, heart hammering in my chest, unsure if she was truly gone. I don't know how long I stayed there, crouched in the alley, too afraid to move. Finally gathering what little courage I had left, I stood. My legs wobbled beneath me, the weight of the night crashing down all at once. But it wasn't over. As I stumbled back to the street, the faint sound of music began again. Soft, distant, but unmistakable. I turned around, and there she was, standing at the far end of the street once more, her eerie dance resuming as if nothing had happened. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs gave out, until I was far from the alley, far from her. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still there, watching, waiting. The next day, I tried to tell my colleagues about what had happened. They laughed it off, of course. A viral hoax, they said, just a trick of the mind. But I knew better. The footage on my camera was all the proof I needed, though I couldn't bring myself to watch it. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to put the experience behind me. But late at night, when the streets of Belgrade were quiet, I would hear it. The soft melody, the haunting sound of her dance, drifting through the air like a whisper of doom. And every time, I knew she was out there, waiting. One night, the music came closer than ever before. Too close. I looked out my window, heart racing, and saw her standing beneath the streetlight, staring up at me. She had found me, and this time, there would be no escape.